So Kieran, do you want to give the Drupal perspective here?
Well, I think I just wanted to give a perspective on, we looked at a lot of what you're here to hear about is about large sites. So we looked at the Alexa 10,000 top-level domains, not including the sub-sites. And so you get a sense that most of the market today is not using a CMS at all. For the very large sites, they have something homegrown or just HTML pages or some kind of publishing system, and then there's pretty good penetration with both WordPress and Drupal. You can go to the next one. I think like Barry had said, both really similar communities. We have a lot in common. We learn from each other all the time. We've got about 1 million plus sites. Tend to be larger sites, more complex, as opposed to sort of more of an end user thing. But they both cover both spaces. We've got about 9,000 modules, and I think one of the big differences around Drupal, around innovation, is a lot of the projects that are plugins are actually their own open source projects. They're very large. They're not. They publish their own set of APIs that then yet other modules use, and so they're basically having site building tools that other people are using to build more sophisticated Drupal, more sophisticated sites. And then there's a lot of developers, almost 7,000 developers on the platform who've been sort of through a review process, a light review process, but to give access so they can commit code live on Drupal.org, and a pretty active community as well. Drupal runs on popular configurations. Eric mentioned earlier, but he said, most of the people who run Drupal are going to run it on a LAMP stack. But Drupal, does want to reach out to other platforms. So in particular, around the database, it supports Postgres because a lot of enterprises, a lot of people running existing systems have their own database. It also runs on Oracle, and then both Microsoft has helped to support compatibility with SQL Server for both WordPress and Drupal. And then the folks from Mongo are here, and one of the things that we really worked on in our compatibility changes in Drupal 7 was being able to support this trend of NoSQL databases. And so we support Mongo as NoSQL, so you can have a really robust data architecture on the back. And we're starting to do some work around Cassandra, trying to see if we can get Cassandra, which is what is the data store behind Facebook, to be Drupal compatible as well. Okay. There's just a couple of questions here around security. I know a lot of enterprises, and this is for people who are looking to adopt large sites, you're going to get challenged internally about whether or not open source can be secure. And so here's the head of the CIO of the Department of Defense basically coming out and stating that the Drupal, or not the Drupal, but open source software, both WordPress and Drupal, as cousins or brothers, if you will, both benefit from having this peer review. And they report issues, we report issues into a broader community of security experts that then go out and fix them. So we think open source is a great alternative for security. And specifically how our team works, if you can switch to the next one, is we have 35 security team members, mostly from different companies, and we regularly publish security advisories. And one of the things you're going to hear is if you're trying to push an open source CMS is you're going to get a lot of reports about security issues. And one of the reasons is we're reviewing code for 7,000, 9,000, 14,000 developers worldwide. They're going to make some security flaws around some of those modules and plugins. What we're doing is we're going out and actually taking responsibility and openly declaring that they're insecure and that there's a version. We think that's a positive thing, but it's the inverse of enterprise software where they try to hide stuff or try to limit the box. We're actually going out aggressively and trying to report security issues from our repositories. And then we have a lot of APIs. Drupal's very developer friendly, very developer focused, and so there's a lot of security APIs in there to prevent you from doing things. And we look at other stuff. And our case point is the White House, which is always one of the most attacked sites in the world. And if you want more information, DrupalSecurityReport.org to learn that. I'll just cover a couple of the features that I think are different. Like Barry said, huge plugin repositories in both systems, so I won't spend a lot of time going over the features because I think you'll find there's a lot of similarity. But Drupal really focuses on integration with other systems. So if you're coming from a large company, you're going to want to look at how do you integrate to mobile devices, how do you integrate to internal IT systems, and so there's a lot of open standards and a lot of data formats that the Drupal focuses on. And the folks at NBC Universal, I was there last week, they had about 100 to 150 people using Drupal as they moved 75% of the organization's web properties to Drupal. And they really see Drupal as a platform bus, or a web services bus, where they plug in all these kinds of disparate systems into Drupal and then publish outside. So really strong support around that. And then we talked about moving. One of the things that Drupal focuses on in its upgrade is it always upgrades and preserves your data. And so we're very focused on preserving data and migration of data and integrating your data with other systems. That's really important to us. One of the big differences is when you compare Drupal and WordPress around data, they might have 3 major releases a year. We just had 1 release, which is our first major release in 3 years. So we tend to be a little bit more on the longer term of the release cycle. And there are migration paths forward, but think about how often you change your website in a major way, right? Every 3 years is pretty reasonable. We're covering a couple of releases, so you could be looking at, before we force you to upgrade, between 2 releases, you could be looking at, somewhere between 5 and 6 years, which is pretty reasonable to make a major reinvestment in upgrading. You still get to preserve a lot of what you've done. Okay, go to the next one. And then there's a big emphasis on authorization and access. So if you're an enterprise, you're not just using any old login thing. You're plugging in, making sure your content editors are appropriately accredited. If you lay off a writer for you, you want to remove their controls on the website right away, so you publish that through your LDAP system. If you need to plug into any kinds of systems, Windows Server or a university system like Kerberos, there's about 370 modules, that's probably growing all the time, of different ways to plug into different enterprise IT systems and get access and user control. So there's a big emphasis on all of that there. Talk a little bit about our release cycle. Like I said, it took about 3 years to get Drupal 7 out. We just sort of opened the floodgates. We had 1,000 contributors contributing to Drupal core in the last release. So anybody can just go in, log onto the site, and start committing patches into the issue queues, and then they get reviewed by peers. And we basically have all these people who are thinking about inventing the web and what the web should be like in the future, and they're arguing back and forth. This is the way features should be. This is the way an overlay should be. This is the way the web should work for people who are blind. This is the way we should scale. This is the way we can plug into Akamai's latest technologies for scalability. And we're arguing back and forth about all these kinds of things. And we leave those gates open for a while, and then we start to nail it down and basically say, okay, we're going to really focus on just a few things. We're effectively going to start locking down the APIs, so this huge set of contrib modules can be ported forward. And over the last few months, I think when we shipped Drupal 7 on January 7th, I want to say maybe there was like 5,000 modules that were available on Drupal, and I checked last night and we're about 9,000 something. So probably something almost on our way to doubling our repository in a few months after Drupal 7's release. So a lot of the stuff's being made available quickly. And then we go into bug fixing. In the last version of Drupal, a lot of enterprises had come to us. I actually got pulled aside in Barcelona in 2007, and they pulled me aside and they said, Kieran, we're going to spend $20 million on Drupal over the next couple of years. Actually, it was 1 year. We're going to spend $20 million in the next year as a bunch of our users. And they said, we want you to get really serious about quality and quality assurance. And so we built in a testing framework so that you can basically run 32,000 tests against all of Drupal's features. And so every time we go to do an update. And so if you've got a Drupal site, it's in your enterprise, you're trying to scale it, you've got a lot of developers working on it, a lot of designers, you can run those 32,000 tests and test for other contributed modules to make sure those modules are supported. How many people have ever installed a plugin and had their site break? Is that? Okay, right. I was at WordPress Camp a year ago, and that was a big emphasis for them, and that's a big emphasis for us, is trying to make sure that the quality of the modules stays high so you don't go through those rough update cycles. And then there was a lot of features. Again, Drupal very focused on developers and capabilities and the future of the web, adding the semantic web. We think, if you're looking at advertising, we think that the web, has been consumed for a long time through a browser, right, through a computer. And now all of a sudden, we're all getting very used to the web being consumed through devices like this, right? But what else is coming down the avenue? Well, the web's going to start getting consumed by machines, right? We're starting to see the semantic web. So being able to mark up data and have Google be able to deliver more appropriate ads or discover stuff because of information. So if you look at data.gov for the United States government, they're publishing all their Drupal, all their information through a Drupal site. If you look at the UK government, they're publishing all their information on a community site and exposing all this data. So we're going to start sharing a lot more data, and these are the kinds of features we added into Drupal 7. Lots of usability improvements, user experience improvements. We think we did a really good job and have got some really positive feedback. But security, hardening, testing, working on making the upgrade path easier for folks, especially when you're moving, potentially hundreds of thousands, maybe in some cases for some of these large sites, millions of dollars worth of developed code, and making it easy to move forward. We put a lot of effort into that as well.